G'day everyone, Jason Nunn with this Friday's fishing report brought to you by Fisherman's Warehouse Marine, Sweet Street at Warmers Bay. And obviously we've taken the opportunity, guys, because the weather has actually finally got out of the doldrums of rain and blowing a gale. As you can see behind me here, Moon Island, the sea doesn't look too bad. They're sort of saying around about 1.5 metres of swell. They're probably right. We're going to have variable winds this weekend, around about 10 knots, maybe 12. Sort of west-southwest, southwest into south tomorrow, but variable, no great wind strengths. Seaward, there's a lot of cloud way out, so there might be still a few coastal showers off the coast, but all in all, I think we're going to make the most of this weekend. Now, the full moon rolled through on Thursday night, and of course, tides this weekend, which are going to be key importance. You've got a 9:30 high tomorrow morning, only around about 1:42, and just before 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon for the low tide. Now, if you're going to go out wide, I'll give you a heads up. Remember last report we were talking about the possibility of yellowfin from last Thursday. The water looked great out wide. Water still in and around about 21.4, no better. But we've got that downhill current again sort of plaguing us, and there were no yellowfin. A few of the boys went out as far as 1,200 fathoms, no sign of life. Back in on the edge, even 600 fathoms. It just didn't look the part, and I just think maybe we might have been a little bit early in our prediction, but it's still encouraging to see what's going. A few striped tuna and everything flipping around, but nothing really jumping out of there. I know Troy Payton was lucky enough out wide there to snare a striped marlin, so obviously still a few or the odd striped marlin around, but water temp down and no yellowfin, so things are really in the wind down for out wide. I think this weekend, obviously on that deeper water, the farm down to the Texas and certainly further south to the perch grounds. Snapper coming in off the back of that moon, big trag, no doubt maybe a few pearlies down south towards the Texas and some kings and longfin perch. So that wider area is looking like it's going to have the goods for this weekend, and that 9:30 high tide tomorrow morning, perfect. Doesn't mean you have to get out crack of dawn to get out there. And the things that we've got to be aware of this time of year, guys, and we've talked about it for years now, this is a whale migration. Obviously the whales will be moving up from south, travelling north, and travelling before and after dark can be a little bit dangerous, basically from now right the way through till at least mid or late July. So you need to be aware of that in your travelling senses. Be aware if you're on anchor, always keep a nice sharp knife next to you, and just in case one of the flutes off one of the humpies gets caught up and starts to pull the boat, you need to cut the rope free. So they're the things you need to be aware of, particularly fishing out on the farm and on the inshore reefs. Great tide tomorrow morning for those inshore reefs. Still a few snapper in close, the odd bonito, but again, trag, and on the back of the moon, no doubt a few mulloway and a few tailor. Now we're starting to see tailor offshore, and they've been a bit scarce. We spoke about it last week, hadn't been a lot around, but we're now starting to see a sprinkling on the inshore reefs and on our rocks, and that's a real key importance. And there's not a lot of swell for the rock fishermen, so I think the rocks this weekend will be pretty good if you want to get down there just on dawn. There are a few pigs around as well, and a few nice luderick and brim, so a little bit to offer for the guys that want to fish the rocks. On the beaches, starting to see a few salmon now. They're just mixed in with a few of these tailor, but there are some beautiful sea run brim along the coast at the moment, and the beach will be the great opportunity to do it. And tomorrow morning, I think on that tide, and it's not a big tide, only 1.4, perfect conditions. If you're going to get into the estuary, well, I had a bit of a crack there last Friday. Some big tailor in the lake, 69 was my best, 69 centimetres, around that 3 kilo bracket. Only got 3, but that was all right. But last night, I took a different option. I got home late and decided that I'd just go back to basics and fish with a few pillies in and around a few of those areas, in around Marks Point, and just have a bit of a look around. Come back with 9 beautiful tailor, biggest one, 61. Got a salmon, threw it back, threw a few small ones back. But it was great to see once that run-in tide came in, and it was a big tide last night too, 194 as it is tonight. So we've got a lot of water pushing in, but the water cleaned up once it started to get in there. So the tailor were coming through, but it was a real blend of fish. You had bigger fish, 55s to 60s, that bigger 61, it was the best. But there were throwbacks, guys, you know, 30s, 35s mixed in with them, and they were coming through in little waves as that tide was fluctuating through. But it was nice to see when the bait did get to the bottom, there were a few brim around. I had 5.0 gangs on. Obviously was no chance of catching any of the bream, but there was quite a few boats around on some of that shallow water chasing bream, and that has been the tips about the Gary Hill through the week, getting some nice bream, but surprisingly enough, before dark, and that is again the key on this moon. You'll always catch more bream prior to the full moon. Last night being the moon happening, a few guys out there from Mulloway, I could see them in the distance, but I thought it was the key for the tailor. Been a lot of tailor down towards Pulver Island and east of Pulver, over towards Murray's and over the back towards Shingle Splitters. Variation in size of fish. They're not all big, and they're not all small. It's just inconsistent with the sizes, but you've got to move around. They're working the bait very, very hard, putting the flathead on the bottom underneath them. There's a few reds in the lake at the present moment and some really nice mullow. As we've seen when we did the report last Thursday, one of the boys coming in, freshly caught, still alive. So that's the type of fishing that's going to be out there. There's been a little bit of activity at the bridge at night, no doubt. There was a couple of dead tailor laying on the footpath when we went for a walk there the other day, so that's obviously still in vogue, fishing illegally off the bridge, great to see. But these big tides hopefully will start to clean the lake out and push a lot more of this salt water back in there and rejuvenate it. It was interesting this week watching the weather report, Gavin Morris, and we knew we'd been getting some bad weather, particularly down here at Swansea. And Nora Head, 700 millimetres since it had started, and Swansea, 600 mil of rain. That is why the lake is so dirty, and certainly up towards Spears Point. Still a lot of colour there, but there's a lot of small mullet moving in and around. And again, this week, there were birds working right up in that corner, so there must be a few salmon and tailor right up in that corner there. But I reckon early is the key. The birds were there around about 9 o'clock. But I reckon just moving around and having a bit of a dig is what you're going to need to do. All in all, guys, it doesn't look like a bad weekend. I think offshore looks pretty good with that variable wind. The lake is looking well, but there's some beautiful big tailor out there. Get out there, have a crack, and we'll talk to you next Friday. See you then.